Here we go. Fractions, decimals, and percents. So fractions, decimals, and percents are really three different ways of writing the same thing, which is showing a number that's not a perfect integer. Right? What we're going to talk about is how do we convert between these different forms. So let's say I started with something like 50%. What does 50% mean? What is it saying? Yeah, it's saying as a fraction 1/2. Or as a decimal 0.5. These are all different ways of saying half. But how do we get from one form to the next? How do we do that? Well, the easiest relationship to see is the relationship between percent and decimals. So if I'm converting, traveling from a percent to a decimal, I only have to do one thing. I move the decimal 2 places left. So 50%, where's the decimal in 50? I don't see one. So where would it be? If I had this number, 50, would you agree that 50 is the same as 50.0? Right? So the decimal in 50 is right at the end of the number. It's right there. And that's going to happen a lot. If you have a percent that's a whole number, your decimal is always right here at the end. So how do I convert this to a decimal? I take this and I move it 2 places to the left. So I now have 0.5, which is the same thing as 0.50, right? 0.50. I just don't need that second zero. And then I get rid of the percent symbol because it's now a decimal. It's no longer a percent. So that's how we change a percent into a decimal.
Is that always? Always change the decimal 2 places?
Yeah. So 75%. Where's our decimal? At the end. I'm going to move it 2 places to the left. So my decimal would be 0.75. How about 16%? 0.16. I have my decimal right here. I move it 2 spaces over. Now these can be a little tricky sometimes. For example, what if I had 3%? Where's my decimal?
It's 0.03.
I move it 2. Yeah, there's like an extra space. And so exactly, you guys are guessing it. We put a 0 there. So 3% is 0.03. If I had 8%, 0.08. What if I had 1.7%? There's already a decimal in this percent. So I still have to move this decimal 2 spaces to the left. So there's my decimal. What do I have to put right here? Yeah, 0.017. So just remember, percent to decimal, 2 places left. Percent to decimal, 2 places left. The decimal is always going to look smaller than the percent, right? Like 0.5 looks smaller than 50%. But it's technically the same number. Yeah.
What if you're converting a decimal to percent? Would you just move 2 to the right?
Exactly. Nice. That's exactly what we're going to do next. So let's say we flip this around. If we want to convert a decimal, marker here, a decimal into a percent, To convert a decimal into a percent, we go 2 spaces right. So if I've got 0.5, here's my decimal. I move it 1, 2 spaces right. And what do I put in this extra space?
0.
A 0. So 0.5 becomes 50. And then what do I have to do? It's not just 50. I have to add that little percent symbol. What if I had the decimal 0.78? What would that become?
78%.
78%. What if I had the decimal 0.63? What would that become?
63%.
What if I had the decimal 0.01? 1%. How about the decimal 0.09? 9%. How about the decimal 0.0178?
Still 1%.
Okay, I'm not going to round it though.
Yeah, 1%.
But it's 1.
Oh,
0.78%. Right? I still have this other part of it. So it's okay to have decimals in a percent. Right? I can have 1.78%. In fact, most taxes use a percentage with a decimal included. What if I had something like 0.632 and I wanted to write that as a
63.2%.
Yeah, so I'm moving it 1, 2 spaces, and that becomes 63.2%. If I had something like 1.1% as a decimal, and I wanted to write it.
It would be 11. No, it would be 101%, right?
100. Where's the 0 go? After the 1, right?
No, 110.
So 100. Is that possible? Can I have a percent bigger than?
Yeah. I mean, like, it depends where.
Look, if the number is bigger than 1, the percent's going to be bigger than 100. Right? So if I have a percentage of, if I have a decimal of 2.3, the percentage is going to be 230. If the number is bigger than 1, the percent is bigger than 100. That's totally possible. Yeah. You see that all the time. Especially people are trying to make their business look really good, and they want to say like, our business is 230% as big as it was last year or something. Which just could mean that their business grew times 2 or something. Which, yeah, that could be great. But it tends to be like in business where you see a lot of people using percentages that are huge because they think they look really good. But 230% is just the same thing as 2.2. So they're just saying that they grew 2 times. But when they say 230%, it sounds so much cooler than saying, oh, we grew times 2. Okay. How do we go from either a percent or a decimal to a fraction? How do we go from a percent or a decimal to a fraction? The answer is that you don't go from a percent to a fraction, really. You can. You usually go from the decimal to the fraction. So we're really going to think about converting between these two. I'm going to show you how to go from a percent to a fraction. Okay. But you could also always go from a percent to a decimal and another decimal.
How do you go from a decimal to a fraction?
Yeah, so we'll talk about that in a second. All right. So the key to going from percent to fraction is to remember what percent means. What does it mean? Percent.
Percent.
Per.
Percent. So
cent. What does cent mean? What number is
So
cent?
every one you make
A cent? How many cents are in a dollar?
100.
100. Cent is a prefix meaning 100.
100.
The Roman numeral for 100 is the letter C. Right? So cent means 100. And so per cent means per 100. So 50% really means 50 per means divided by 100. So 50% as a fraction is 50 over 100. But wait, we said it was 1 over 2. So did we do something wrong? Now we have to reduce it. So 50 over 100 is equal 1 over 2 because they both can divide by 50. So it's 1. So when you have a percent, you put it over 100. Now, the reason I don't necessarily like this method is because you could end up with a decimal in your fraction, which you don't ever want to have, right? So like if I started with something like 62.3%, and then I had 62.3 over 100,
We would just
I
round.
can't reduce that.
No, we would just round.
We could round, but that's not really converting, that's rounding.
Would you divide?
So that's kind of weird, right? You could then divide it to make it into a decimal. But it's easier, I think it's easier personally, to first convert so many different words. First convert the percent to a decimal. Because you can always convert a decimal into a fraction. And it's actually pretty easy. So to convert a decimal to a fraction, if I had the decimal 0.3, what's the way, how do we say 0.3? You guys know? There's a way of saying that. 3/10.
Oh, yeah.
Wait a second. 3/10. That's just a fraction, isn't it? 3/10. This is the tenths place.
Yeah, then there's 100.
So just like you guys probably in first or second. That was the king.
Is it ruined?
No, it just fell.
I want to know if that was clear.
Probably kind of scary in a way. All right, so 3/10, because this is the tenths place. Just like you guys learned in first or second grade that you've got the ones place, the tens place, the hundreds place,
Yeah.
the thousands place. It goes the other way. This is the tenths place.
Yeah.
This is the hundredths place, right?
It's 1,000.
This is the thousandths place, whatever. So each number to the right of the decimal place is adding another 0 to the place. Okay? So to convert from a decimal to a fraction, I count the numbers to the right of the decimal. Count numbers to the right of the decimal and make a fraction with a denominator equal to the decimal place. So if I wrote this fraction, this is the tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So this is going to be 7/1/8 over 1,000.
What if it's
Now, hold on one second. What I want you to notice is that the number of places to the right of the decimal tells us the number of zeros in that number. So if you get lost, like if you had a really long decimal, 0.789642365. Okay, this is really hard. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths, millions. It's easy to get lost, right? So instead, let's just count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm going to write this number, 789642365, over a 1 with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 zeros. And that is the same thing. Then I would have to try to reduce this. Good luck. Right? But you're always going to try to reduce your fractions. So like in this example, I'm not done because these could both be divided by 2. Right? This is like 359 over 500 when I reduce it. So you can always try to reduce your fraction. I'm not going to try to reduce this one. I would probably use a calculator. I noticed that this ends in 5, so they're both divisible by 5. So I could do that. We could do it if you want to. So 7, I don't know if this will fit on this calculator. That's why I wasn't going to do it, but let's see. 7, 8, 9, 6, 4, 2, 3, 6, 5. It doesn't fit. Okay, so let's do it by hand. 7, 8, 9, 6, 4, 2, 3, 6, 5. Divided by 5. It should go in evenly. 1 with a remainder of 2. 5 with a remainder of 3. 7 with a remainder of 4. 9 with a remainder of 1. 2 with a remainder of 4. 8 with a remainder of 2. 4 with a remainder of 3. 7 with a remainder of 1. 3. So I divided those by 5. Because I know that this can also be divided by 5.
Okay.
If it ends in a 5 or a 0, it's divisible by 5, right?
Okay. What if it ends in a 9? Would it 63?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, there's no rule for something that ends in a 9, right? Okay. So I would have 1, 5, 7, 9, 2, 8, 7, 3. And then this divided by 5, right? It's just 5 goes into 10 twice, and then we just have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 zeros. But I counted that, right?
Can you
1, 2, 3,
store
4,
it into
5. Yeah. There's I don't know the factors of whatever numbers this is. 157,928,407. There are some tricks for finding factors of numbers. I don't really want to go into that today. Right? I was just trying to give a really long example to show you an easy way to find what your denominator is. But then reducing it, you're just going to do as best you can. Right? I don't want to focus on that because I think it will distract from the process that we're really trying to focus on. Alright, so let's do a couple more examples. Converting a decimal to a fraction. If I had 0.62, 0.6212, so over 100. That I know can both be reduced by dividing by 2. So I would have 31 over 50. Let's say my decimal was 0.79. 79 over 100. And I don't see any way to reduce that. So let's say you got 62 over 100 and you didn't get this. You did the process right, you just didn't reduce, right? So don't worry too much about the reducing. I'm really looking for this first step. What if I had this, 0.09? How many numbers are here? We still count this 0. 1, 2. So I would put 9 over 100. Because 0, 9, right, is just 9. You guys see that? So when there's a 0 like in between the decimal, we can kind of leave it out. If I had something like this, 1.65, I'm only counting the numbers to the right of the decimal, right? So this would be 1, 2.
So
165 over, in this case, I'm still only counting these. Now, think about it. This number is bigger than 1. This fraction has a numerator bigger than the denominator. We could make it a mixed number. We could make it 1 and 65 over 100. That's another way of doing it. But in algebra, I actually like improper fractions better than mixed numbers. So you could just leave it. But we could reduce this, actually. We could divide both of those by 5, which is like 33 over 10. Is that right? 5 goes into that 3 times, right? 165 divided by 5. 3, 15, 15, 33 over 10. So we're simply counting the number of numbers to the right of the decimal, and we're putting that many zeros in our denominator. Okay? Count the number of numbers to the right, and then put that many zeros. Let's do a whole bunch of examples. Okay, 0.621. What's my fraction? 621 over 1,000. 1, 2, 3 zeros, because I had 3 numbers there. Okay, 0.5483. 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros, because there were 4 numbers there. 0.7. 7 over 10. 7 10. Because there's 1 number, so I have 1 0. 0.62. 62 over 100, which is 31 over 50. Hey, look, we're going to get that. I don't want you to forget that you can reduce these, right? These ones I tried to make, hopefully they don't reduce. It's possible that they do. But your denominator pretty much only has like 2's and 5's in it. So if this isn't even or it doesn't end with a 5, then it's probably not able to be reduced, right?
So we don't have to reduce it?
Well, like your denominator, since it's always a multiple of 10, it only has, it's either like, you could reduce it by dividing by 2, dividing by 5, or maybe dividing by 4 or by 10. So if the numerator is not divisible by 2 or 5, then you're not going to be able to reduce the fraction. If the numerator doesn't end in an even number, and if it's not, or if it doesn't end in a 5, then you can't reduce it. Does that make sense? Maybe we need to review reducing fractions too. It's not really the focus of today. The focus is how do we get from here to here. And that's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and that. Okay, so that's I think this is the hardest one. Going from a decimal to a fraction, you've got to kind of remember a lot of rules, right? Count up, put it over, okay. Now, going from a fraction to a decimal is actually way easier. How do we go from a fraction to a decimal? If I had the fraction 2/5, how do I make that into a decimal? And to do this, we just remember one word. Divide. Every fraction is a division problem. So to go from 2/5 to a decimal, I just do 2 divided by 5. 5 can't go into 2, so I make this a decimal. 5 goes into 24 times, even. And so my decimal is 0.4. I could do this on a calculator too. You pull out my calculator, and I could just say 2 divided by 5 equals 0.4. So to go from a fraction to a decimal, you just divide. Right? It's pretty straightforward. Now, what if it said, though, to go from a fraction to a percent? In that case, you actually have to first divide and then convert the decimal to a percent. So I want to practice that. How do we go from a fraction to a percent? Let's say I had the fraction 3/7. So the first thing I'm going to do is divide. 3 divided by 7. And I get a really long number. So I'm going to round it. Right? I'm going to round this to 0.4286. Now I'm going to convert that into a percent. How do I do that? Move the decimal 2 places to the right. So this would be 42.86%. Now, what's true about these is that not every number that can be written neatly as a fraction can be written neatly as a decimal. Some fractions go on and on and on and on and on forever as decimals. There's no way that we can write that on our board, right? We'd run out of space. So sometimes you do have to round when you're going from a fraction to a decimal. All right, let's do a couple more examples. What if I had 4/15? And I want to write that as a percent. Okay, 4, other way around. 4 divided by 15, right? That's 0.26 repeating. So now what do? I want it to be a percent. I move the decimal 2 spaces, so it would be 26.6 repeating percent. How about 4/5? Step 1, 4 divided by 5, which is 0.8. Step 2,
Move the decimal 2 places.
move it 2 spaces, 1, 2. What am I going to put in this space?
80.
Yeah, so it's 80%. 80%. 4/5 equals 80%. Does that make sense? So now we can convert between all these different numbers. I want to say a couple things though. As you're doing this, you're trying to remember these processes and these steps, but you can also use a little bit of your common sense, right? Like we all know 50% is 1/2.
Yeah.
And there's some other ones that you might start to recognize. I bet you could tell me what 1/4 is as a percent. What's 1/4? It's half of a half. So what's half of 50?
25.
Yeah, 1/4 is 25%, or 0.25. A lot of people also know 1/5, which is 20%, right? We know that 1 is equal to 100%. So if you have these numbers in the back of your mind, you can use some common sense as you do this, right? We know that 3/7 being 42.8% makes sense because this is really close to a half, right? 3/6 would be 1/2. So it's really close to a half. And 42% is really close to 50%. we know that any number bigger than 1 is going to be bigger than 100%. So if you keep those benchmarks in your head, it'll help you it'll keep you from making any careless mistakes, or it'll help you catch your own mistakes when you make them. Right? If you have a number smaller than 1, your percent better be smaller than 100%. Right? Okay, any questions, guys?
No.
All right, let's try this.